Welcome to the Workforce Wire podcast, brought to you by Employ Prince George's, bridging the gap between job seekers and businesses. And now, here's your host, Walter Simmons.
Welcome to the Workforce Wire. This is your host, Walter Simmons, President and CEO of Employ Prince George's. Today's episode is very special. We're in the middle of the 2019 Apprenticeship Week, National Apprenticeship Week, and we're celebrating that in Prince George's County. So the topic of today is Registered Apprenticeship 101, Registered Apprenticeship 101. And we have the Maryland Apprenticeship expert here, Chris McLaren, the director of the Maryland Apprenticeship and Training Program at the Maryland Department of Labor. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Walter.
So, Chris, before we get anything started, the Workforce Wire is broadcasted to job seekers, businesses, and workforce professionals from across the country. So the number one question I ask every guest is, what was their career pathway and what led them to their current role? So tell our listeners, what was your own personal pathway that led you to be Maryland's apprenticeship expert as the director of apprenticeship and Maryland's Apprenticeship and Training Program?
Sure, happy to, and thank you for having me here again today. So my pathway is a little bit different. I did not start off in workforce development. I graduated high school and I worked for a very small family-owned masonry company. Did that for about a year and a half and really couldn't figure out what my career path was going to be, so I joined the Army. I spent 3 years at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in the 82nd Airborne. Had a family, had a couple daughters, and decided that at the end of my tour it was time to come home. And I went to work at a company you may be familiar with, Bethlehem Steel, Sparrows Point, Maryland, Baltimore County. Stayed there for 16 years and 5 days. And why I can tell you that exactly is because that's the day the company went bankrupt. So I entered workforce development through a workforce program, actually. It was called the TA program, the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, through the Maryland Department of Labor, formerly known as the Maryland Department of Labor License and Regulation. But basically, they work to retrain workers that have lost their jobs. So while going through that program, I got a job at the Maryland Department of Labor, managing grants, managing national emergency grants, and slowly that pathway led to becoming the director of the Apprenticeship and Training Program at the Department of Labor.
Well, Chris, thank you for your service, for one, and I guess everything happens for a reason. I know it's been an honor to work with you, and you're a great resource to Maryland. So, but it's unique because for all our workforce professionals, one thing you heard Chris say is, he was a dislocated worker. He received services, he provided training, he was in masonry, he was in the military, which is very unique because the military is like the original apprenticeship program, but apprenticeship is a big buzzword right now. And I feel like every conference I go to, people are throwing out the word apprenticeship, businesses do apprenticeship, even training providers reach out to me all the time and say, I'm doing an apprenticeship. And so a lot of our workforce professionals, our job seekers and businesses, I think a lot of us don't really know what an apprenticeship is, or nor do the people who are throwing the word around. So can you tell us what is an actual apprenticeship?
So that's a great question. It's a great place to start, in my opinion, because apprenticeship is a big buzzword today. And when you think of apprenticeship, it's how you learn a job. It's how you learn a job while you're on the job, and you're learning from a journey worker or from a mentor. But what is apprenticeship? Well, really, apprenticeship is registered apprenticeship, and that is where a company or a program has registered the work that they are doing with a state apprenticeship agency, like the state of Maryland, or with the federal United States Department of Labor. So in particular, what it is, it's a way that you can customize a training program for a worker, for your workforce. You can bring them in, you can combine on-the-job training with school, with related instruction, and you can educate your workforce, you can customize it, and you can make it as flexible as you need so that you can create the workforce of today that you need for tomorrow.
So you said a key word there, registered with the state apprenticeship agency, like the Maryland Department of Labor, or with the United States Department of Labor. That means it's registered. So what are the benefits of a registered apprenticeship versus a non-registered apprenticeship?
A registered apprenticeship program, and you go through a registration process with, in this case, the state of Maryland, where our staff comes out and they assist you in developing what we call the standards of apprenticeship. And it's how you're going to train those workers and how you're going to educate those workers. And it involves a step. You're involving the government as a partner, basically, and it comes with some benefits. So first and foremost, it's portable. So the workforce that you're training, when they graduate from a registered apprenticeship program, it's recognized state to state. Second is you've
So it's
connected.
like transferring from a college.
Absolutely. It's, if you're an electrician in Maryland, you should go be an electrician in North Carolina. It's a very seamless process. And the other thing that it does is involving government as a partner is you connect it, just like what we're doing today, to a local workforce area, to the workforce system, to the state of Maryland and their workforce benefits, whether it's a tax credit for an apprentice that you register, which, by the way, Maryland has right now. For every new apprentice you register, after they work for you for 7 months, you get a $1,000 tax credit.
Woo!
You can combine yourself with some incumbent worker programs, like what you do here in Prince George's County, or with the state of Maryland's Maryland Business Works program, where we'll assist you with up to 50% of the cost of related instruction for all eligible entities. So you kind of involve all of that, but you're also, for the worker, once you've registered that, it's portable, like you said, you can go state to state. Most of our community colleges affiliate with Registered Apprenticeship, so quite often, in the vast majority of our cases, your apprentices are actually gaining college credit while they're in their apprenticeship program, which, if you think about this in the day of recruitment and parents wanting their kids to go to college, what better way to connect work with a college education, with a career, than through Registered Apprenticeship?
So that was a lot of information. For people that need to pull out the key diamonds in what Chris said, a registered apprenticeship is like receiving a accreditation. That means that, this transfers. You can go to another apprenticeship or another union outside of your current state. Another element that he mentioned is that it can be attached to the local community college, which means you can get college credit. He also mentioned that apprenticeship includes classroom training and work-based learning. So a lot of times people think an apprenticeship is a program. Apprenticeship is not a program. Apprenticeship is employment. You have to get employed. And what a registered apprenticeship says is that when you gain employment, the employer will agree to train you to increase your skills and proficiency. Did I get that right, Chris?
You nailed it, and that's what makes that buzzword all the more powerful, is because if you're an apprentice, you're not an intern, you're not a part-time employee.
You're not a
You are an
student.
employee from day one, and you're being trained on the job, and you're progressively earning wages that get higher as you learn your job, as you become more competent, and you're 100% correct.
So you come in as an apprentice, and then what do you work towards?
So every program's a little bit different. Every sponsor runs their apprenticeship program a little bit different, but they all have a couple key elements that are the same. And you nailed the first one, is you're an employee day one. Let's make this a 2-year registered apprenticeship program for being let's do this one, that you're going to be a podcast expert. You're going to be a communications director, and it's going to last 2 years. You're going to progress from day one as an apprentice to the end of the second year where you'll be a journey worker. If that industry doesn't use the word journey worker, just call it a professional. You're going to be the expert in your industry at the end of your apprenticeship program, able to do all aspects of your job.
So you come in as an entry level, like an apprentice, and you move to become a journeyman or an expert in the field.
Yep, a journey worker, an expert in the field, yep.
So we already have our in-house podcast expert. We call her Arian Tyler. So I'm going to shout out Arian, who's our Workforce Wire producer, podcast extraordinaire. Thank you, Arian. So we know what a registered apprenticeship is. Apprenticeship is huge in Maryland. How many apprenticeships are there in Maryland?
In Maryland, if you are doing registered apprenticeship, you're either an employer that participates with a registered apprenticeship sponsor, or you're a sponsor that runs your own program. So in Maryland, we have 153 registered apprenticeship programs, sponsors, that are up and actively have apprentices working for them today. Doesn't sound like a huge amount until you start to look at how many of those sponsors have dozens to hundreds of employers that participate. So today, I ran the numbers right before I came here for you. We have 153 of those active sponsors that have just over 3,700 employers participating in the program, and just over 10,100 apprentices across the state of Maryland in a host of occupations working and learning.
So you have 153 apprenticeship programs, curriculum, or registered apprenticeships attached to 153, there's 153 apprenticeships attached to how many employers?
Just over 3,700 with an apprentice.
So 3,700 employers operate 153 apprenticeship programs to employ over 10,000 people, 10,000 jobs in Maryland.
Absolutely.
And so people understand that as the work continues, as businesses grow, that means they'll need more and more apprenticeships and apprentices. And one thing to keep in track, and we talk about the future of work. I'm going to have a podcast when I talk about the future of work. One of the big things we don't talk about is that one of the largest population in our workforce are baby boomers. The second largest is millennials. But another avid piece of this is that element that people don't realize is Generation Xers. They say millennials are Generation Y, and then you got Generation Z. But the older Generation Xers and our baby boomers are retiring. And so the future of work is going to be really backfilling a lot of these building trades and industrial positions that are apprenticeship based organizations that are union or their apprenticeship and they need a skilled trade. And the future of work is not only technology, the future of work is backfilling these positions. And when I talk to our local building trades, they say they need people. They really need the assistance to do so. So I really want to make sure people focus and understand when Chris said using the talent pipeline of our youth and putting them directly into employment. Apprenticeships is a great opportunity because one, it's employment, they're bringing in wages, they can receive college credit, and second, no student loan debt. So really take that into fact. Chris, if they want to know about those 153 apprenticeship programs, where can they get more information about Maryland's apprenticeship and training program?
The easiest thing to do, go right to our website. And rather than give you a really long website, I'm going to give you something that we made just for the apprenticeship community. It's called MD, as in Maryland, MDapprenticeship.com. And that will flip you right over to the Maryland Department of Labor website, and smack dab in the middle of that page, MDapprenticeship.com, right in the middle of the page, you'll see something called the Apprenticeship Locator. Click on it, and all the information you could possibly want about a sponsor is right inside that link.
All right, good people, MDapprenticeship.com. That's MDapprenticeship.com. And Chris, one thing I want to highlight on that I just kind of came to my thought is Prince George's County has the largest population of people without a high school diploma, second largest unemployed population, a large returning citizen population, a large population of disconnected youth, recent grads that have no experience. What about pre-apprenticeships? What if a person might not be ready? Because you said apprenticeship is employment. What if they're not quite ready for employment? Tell me about what a pre-apprenticeship is.
So a pre-apprenticeship is basically when a sponsor or a group of employers that are participating in an apprenticeship program get together and they're not getting the type or quantity of talent that they need. And if that quantity of talent doesn't have all the skills they need to begin, just the base level, the entry level apprenticeship, skills and criteria. So what they'll do is they'll say, well, let's create a pre-apprenticeship program. And what that does is it takes job seekers that otherwise don't meet that minimum qualification, and in a relatively short period of time, it could be a few hundred hours worth of training, a couple weeks, they deliver that essential skills that would need to get them into an apprenticeship. And that way, those job seekers that otherwise would be disqualified now have an opportunity to enter it. So in construction, it could be something as simple as they bring you in, they assess your math skills, maybe they give you some trade math, they give you some basic tool orientation, and they work on maybe even some life skills, some soft skills, some workforce skills, where how do you get to work on time? How are you, removing some barriers to transportation? How do you dress for an interview? How do you report to your boss? How do you, if you're not going to come to work that day, how do you report off? So pre-apprenticeship can deliver all of that, and it's bundled together to seamlessly let you then enter into an apprenticeship.
So you get that, people, the pre-apprenticeship is for our workforce professionals out there. Pre-apprenticeship is a great opportunity to work with some of our workforce innovation opportunity at target populations, some of our job seekers with multiple barriers to employment that aren't quite ready for employment. A pre-apprenticeship is a great opportunity to prepare them for that apprenticeship and employment. Employ Prince George's really focuses on apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships through our Construction Works program. We have a great relationship, and I'm going to shout out Brian Cordian, International Union of Painters, and Allied Trades 51 for the DC Metro and the Finishing Trades Institute. We're doing a lot of great work there. If you want to know more about Employ Prince George's apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship training programs, visit us at www.employpg.org. Again, www.employpg.org. And so this kind of leads me to my next question, because I mentioned we've talked about pre-apprenticeships, we talked about apprenticeships, and you talked about 153 registered apprenticeships. Now, what are the different types of apprenticeships? Because I know we're not talking about pre-apprenticeship, that's before you get to apprenticeship, people. So we're just going to talk about apprenticeships. When you say 153, does that include, adult apprenticeships, youth apprenticeships? What are the different types of registered apprenticeships?
Sure. So, let's stay with just with the registered apprenticeship piece for a second. And what we'll do is go back a couple of questions where you asked me, what is it? So the easiest thing that I can say is registered apprenticeship. It gives employers the opportunity to reimagine, to reinvent how they're going to train, educate, and recruit, tomorrow's workers today. How to get them into that pipeline to solve that baby boomer crisis you were talking about, the retirement crisis you're talking about. But also, it's how you train. So we have two primary type of apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships in the state of Maryland. The first is a time-based program. And when you were going through your relationship in Prince George's County with the building trades, with the skilled trades apprenticeships, that is your main apprenticeship historically when you go back 80 years in the United States. It's how do you train electricians, HVAC technicians, plumbers, steam fitters? How do you teach them to do the work that they do safely and as the most educated worker you can get?
And that's time.
And that's a time-based. It's where the employer, the industry says to us, look, to train an electrician, it takes 4 years, 8,000 hours of work combined with, as you talked earlier, education. So every year the apprentice will go to school to some kind of related instruction training, school for the worker, for 144 hours a year. They couple that with all that on-the-job training. So at the end of the 4th year, you have a journey worker electrician that can now take their own apprentice. And for that company, you've just expanded your workforce. The second one is newer, and this is where you look at some of those non-traditional occupations that maybe they did apprenticeship in the 80s, and they kind of got away from it, or maybe they've never done it because it's a new industry like information technology or cyber, and those are called competency-based programs. And that allows an apprentice to progress through the apprenticeship, through the training, as they achieve competencies versus a defined amount of time. So, maybe your apprenticeship lasts loosely for a year, but an apprentice that comes in a little bit more of education, maybe they have a little bit of work experience, they might progress that apprenticeship in 9 months. Whereas somebody like myself that has no cyber skills, maybe it takes me 15 or 16 months. But the industry and the employer set up those criteria, those benchmarks for you to achieve those competencies. And that gives you a competency-based apprenticeship versus a time-based, and lets the employer and the industry decide what fits their mold best.
So an apprenticeship, there's time-based and there's competency-based. That's great information for you all. And then one thing Chris really highlighted, a lot of times apprenticeships are associated with the building trades. Chris talked about apprenticeships in IT. He even joked about the podcast apprenticeships. So a common misnomer is apprenticeships are only for the building trades. It sounds like you're saying apprenticeship can span any industry.
Absolutely. If you can combine on-the-job training with school, you can apprentice almost anything.
Any occupation, any industry.
Yep. And really the criteria that we're setting for each other as the workforce system is, what do you want to deliver from it? We probably aren't apprenticing a janitor's position where you don't need to couple it with school, and maybe brain surgeon on the extreme other end is somewhere that we're not doing an apprenticeship. But really almost anything in between those two marks, we could set up a registered apprenticeship program for. Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you, Chris isn't lying, because recently I read that they have the first lawyer apprenticeship in the United States. This has really been made kind of popular because Kim Kardashian in California is going through to becoming a lawyer, and everybody said, well, how can she become a lawyer without a degree? And when I looked at it, I was like, oh, she's doing the lawyer apprenticeship in California. So as a workforce professional, it was really unique to kind of see apprenticeships really rise into the limelight on TMZ through Kim Kardashian. So you can almost apprentice anything where you need a defined skill set, and that's great information. Another piece that Chris highlighted, and I'm going to start talking directly to my workforce professionals. I'm going to talk directly to you. Apprenticeships are a toolkit. They should be used in your business services toolkit. Chris keeps saying an apprenticeship is something you can imagine. One thing that we identified locally is that our small business, and this is where people make hires in local workforce systems, is working with your small and medium-sized businesses. They can't afford a training program like a Hyatt, like a Walmart, like a Nordstrom, or these huge companies with these huge training programs. An apprenticeship allows you to work one-on-one with this organization or this business to create a nationally standard curriculum to train people. So you could be a small, medium-sized business and have 25 employees, but you can work with a local workforce system, and local workforce systems can work with small businesses to create these apprenticeship programs and to give that small business a training that is the equivalent, and you can pull standards from different places and find your state apprenticeship director or Department of Labor regional apprenticeship person to create this training program. So workforce professionals, please see this as a tool to help your businesses advance. One thing that you're going to have to know is how to register an apprenticeship. So Chris, what does it mean when somebody like me, Walter, a workforce board director in Prince George's County, wants to work with a business to register an apprenticeship?
So, and it's almost a leading question, Walter, because you've sent a couple over to me, which you and your staff have really gotten all the way to the table for us, which is extremely helpful when you're talking to the workforce system out there. And really what it is you're going to call somebody like myself or go to mdapprenticeship.com and click, contact us.
mdapprenticeship.com, people, if you're looking for apprenticeships in Maryland. mdapprenticeship.com.
And when you get there, click contact us. And what it does is basically you're going to get an email that goes right to myself or to one of our staff, and let us know what you're looking to do. We send staff out there to assist the business or to assist the workforce system, like someone like yourself, Walter, in sitting with the business and developing out that entire standard. We do not just mail this to the sponsor, a set of documents, and say, hey, fill this out. We're going to go step by step with you. We're going to go through the registration. Like, what are you looking for? What are your hopes from the apprenticeship? Are you looking for it as a recruitment tool? Do you need assistance with maybe offsetting the cost of the related instruction, the schooling? Are you looking to connect deep with your local workforce area if it's not already done? And we'll bridge that contact as well. So basically, go to mdapprenticeship.com and click Contact Us, and we'll be there and we'll assist you with that.
So that's great information. Again, if you're looking at, we're live on the Workforce Wire. If you're looking at registering an apprenticeship in Maryland, you need to be at you need to visit mdapprenticeship.com. And one thing that I really want to point out, and I'm going to shout out my brother Joseph Tolbert on here, because a lot of questions I always get is can returning citizens get into apprenticeships? And one thing that we've really seen, especially working with our building trades, is that we've been able to take a lot of returning citizens and get them into apprenticeships and get them in at Davis-Bacon, union level benefits and wages. And so what do you think about the opportunity? Give me your take on how do you feel apprenticeship helps people with barriers to employment and low skills? So we got Chris McLaren here on our podcast. I'm going live, Arian.
We're going to go all the way back to something you said earlier, is this is a job at day one, right? So whenever we're talking registered apprenticeship, this is dependent upon employer participation. So your employers, the sponsors of the program, they're going to set for us what is the baseline needs of the program. So if you have a company that's doing, let's stay with skilled trades now for you. They're doing all electrical work up at the NSA, maybe a background is something that they can't work with because of security clearance issues.
Yep.
And I start with that as an example because the employer is going to set the limits, right? We have sponsors that have said to us, look, you do not need a high school diploma to enter our registered apprenticeship program. We have other sponsors that say you absolutely must have a high school diploma.
Because apprenticeship is a job, so you have to gain employment.
100%. And in that application process, the sponsors laid out the minimum criteria. So we do have sponsors and programs and employers all over the state that being a returning citizen, being an ex-offender, whichever word we're using, is not a knockout for not being in an apprenticeship program. You can certainly still enter it.
And you just highlighted something, that you can get into an apprenticeship without a high school diploma. I know that the finishing trades in Prince George's County is accepting people without a high school diploma. And we've even started working with our English language learner community. We're doing an IBEST model, so people actually learning the trades and learning English all in one. So you really can customize apprenticeships to what the employer needs, as long as a workforce professional in a local area can find the resources.
And that comes back to reimagining it and reinventing to how are you going to bring a job seeker into your program? If you're not attracting talent today, let's look at how we can redo this. What are your true limits? Is a high school diploma required? Great. Is an ex-offender? Is that a barrier? Is it truly a barrier? Let's sit down and have that conversation. Quite often what we find is when you get into heavy manufacturing and construction, it's not as big a barrier as we thought it might be, helping these job seekers get in. And it's been a great conversation. And apprenticeship does help to mitigate and remove some of that.
Reimagine apprenticeships. I'm here on the Workforce Wire with Chris McLaren, the director of the Maryland Apprenticeship and Training Program. We're talking about reimagine apprenticeships, providing apprenticeships for small to medium-sized businesses, apprenticeships for people with barriers, for English language learners, for returning citizens. If you want more information about apprenticeships in Maryland, visit mdapprenticeship.com. mdapprenticeship.com, mdapprenticeship.com. If you want information about what we're doing with pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships in Prince George's County, visit us at www.employpg.org. We're here live on the Workforce Wire. So one of the last things I want to talk about are what are the benefits to apprenticeship to job seekers?
Let's talk about two ways, right? So job seekers, you're coming in, you're otherwise not qualified. An apprenticeship offers you the opportunity to come in and learn a trade. So let's stay with electricians. We know it can be a hazardous job. We know there's a lot to learn. They could be doing residential electricity where they're putting the ceiling fan, but they could be doing street light wiring. They could be doing high voltage work on the power lines when they go out during a storm or when they're laying new power lines in. They could be working on a nuclear reactor. There's a lot to learn, right? So when you're looking at that, they've decided that this is a 4-year program. Nobody comes in to be an electrician and they're ready to be an electrician right out of high school. It takes a few years to do it. So the benefit for a job seeker is you get to come in and learn a trade, an occupation, a skill over an amount of time where the industry has basically set that into place for you. But on the same hand, we can't talk about why it's good for a job seeker without talking about why it's good for a business.
Definitely.
Because it allows the business to do the exact same thing. They can bring in otherwise raw talent, people that they would want to work for their organization, but they can't be an electrician day one, or they can't be a nurse day one, or they can't be a cybersecurity expert on day one. So this gives you the opportunity to train them, but it also gives you a chance to look at new pools of talent. So you mentioned ex-offenders. People that don't speak English yet.
English language learners.
People with or without a high school diploma.
Disconnected youth.
Disconnected youth. There's so many populations out there that otherwise might get skipped over that offer a great work ethic and great talent to come into your organization if you can train them. So it allows you to customize that training and bring in these job seekers. You can diversify your workforce. You can grow your workforce. And something that we kind of glanced over at the beginning is, why do employers do this? What is a benefit to them as well as the job seeker? You come in as an apprentice, and we'll make up a number, right? We'll say $12 an hour is your starting rate, and $30 is your exit rate. So you get hired as a day one apprentice making $12, and you'll finish 3 years later, let's say, making $30. The employer says, as you achieve these competencies, every 3 months, 6 months, you get a raise, 5%, $1, whatever it is. And you walk your way through the apprenticeship. So the apprentice constantly gets increased earnings while he delivers more work to the employer, to the sponsor. But the other thing with it is that when you look at the cost of training, if you say I'm making $12 and we want to use Prince George's Community College to educate the worker, you could theoretically build an associate's degree into your apprenticeship program over 3 years. And for about $1.50 an hour on top of the wages, your apprentice could go to college while he works for you or she works for you full time. And at the end of the apprenticeship, not only are they a journey worker, they're an expert in the industry, but maybe they graduate with an associate's degree.
And you train them so you can increase your retention rates. Because apprenticeships show that people, one, they're more effective and productive on the job, but also they stay with that same employer for longer periods. So I also want to add in, Chris mentioned this too, there's tax credits, and businesses can work with local workforce programs to get other funds and even state agencies to get different funds to support their apprenticeships and tax credits. So not only is there a benefit of improving your workforce, keeping talent longer by increasing your retention rates, there also can find some tax credits, and it can not cost you a dime because you're working with your local workforce program. Apprenticeships are good for business, and apprenticeship are good for the residents. I want to end with this because we got our last 2 minutes left. Youth apprenticeship. Can you give us just a high-level overview about youth apprenticeship? And I think we'll probably end up bringing you back on, Chris, to really do a deeper dive into youth apprenticeship.
Youth apprenticeships are one of the most exciting and amazing things that we've had in the last 3 years at the Maryland Department of Labor, and with our partners at Commerce, Maryland State Department of Education, the local school systems, and the employers. And what it basically does is it gives an apprenticeship-like experience to a high school junior or senior where an employer brings them on into preferably a STEM-related occupation where the student will get 450 minimum paid hours of employment while the school system, it could be a union, it could be an association, it could be a college, offers them related instruction, school in that industry. So really what happens is at the end of it, the high school student gets a certificate from the state of Maryland, from the Department of Labor, that they've completed a youth apprenticeship. It goes into their high school credit, so they get credit in high school to graduate with, which of course, as you know, it increases the number of CTE students that are coming out of the school system, so there's a win there. But the employers get to bring in a workforce at a much younger age to let them know there is an option without college, without that debt. But it also says, look, this also might not be for you, and college was your route. So that the apprentice has the opportunity now to try out an industry, and hopefully they stay with it, and the retention numbers increase for the employer. But also, if it wasn't the perfect match, they now go to college without going to college first and coming back with all that debt you spoke of, and then looking for a job. So we kind of just reversed that. So you'll do the apprenticeship, the youth apprenticeship on the front end, and go from there.
Great, youth apprenticeship. We're going to be talking about that. This is National Apprenticeship Week, the 2019 National Apprenticeship Week. This is Apprenticeship Week in Prince George's County. I want to thank my guest, Chris McLaren, Director of the Maryland Apprenticeship and Training Program at the Maryland Department of Labor. Chris, thank you for coming on to the show, The Workforce Wire.
Thank you, as always, for having me.
You got it. And where can they get more information about Maryland apprenticeships?
Go to mdapprenticeship.com.
mdapprenticeship.com. And for those in Prince George's County, if you want to know what's happening in workforce development in Prince George's County, visit www.employpg.org. This is Walter Simmons at the Workforce Wire. This is it for our show. Again, Employ Prince George's doing workforce development in Prince George's County, bridging the gap between job seekers and businesses. Subscribe to the Workforce Wire. Follow us at EmployPG on all social media outlets. Thank you and have a good day.